Good evening and thank you for tuning into Brand Plus TV. It's always a delight knowing that you've taken your time and are keeping us company. My name is Ndiro Ganga, ready to bring you up to speed with all the top stories making headlines today. And as you know, we're all about business. Here's a glance of those stories.
We are compelled to meet here and talk on this one because there is no any seriousness coming from the government.
It's a no from workers' umbrella body. Tough talking Cotto Secretary General wants 16% VAT tax on fuel abolished.
Thank you, Chair.
Future Energy East Africa Conference and Expo 2018. East Africa power players meet in an effort to chart the way forward on matters energy.
Presentation to be uploaded.
Kenya Media Week, fake news. What is the way forward?
I'll continue with our discussions.
Rural farmers with just very small plots having their soil analysed so they know what are the best crops for them to grow.
AIDEX 2018 Nairobi Conference. Aid workers congregate to discuss the place of technology in social impact.
Technology innovations which are transformative.
Thank you for staying with us. Now on to our top story. Cotto Secretary General Francis Atwoli wants the government to suspend the 16% VAT on petroleum products due to the added burden on the workers. He warned of a possible industrial action should the demand not be met. He was addressing the media during a press conference held today at the Cotto headquarters in Nairobi, and our reporter Elsa Atieno has the details.
Cotto Secretary General Francis Atwoli, during a press briefing today, called upon President Uhuru Kenyatta to assent into law the finance bill seeking to suspend implementation of the 16% VAT on petroleum products for a further 2 years.
We are circumstantially compelled to appeal to President Uhuru Kenyatta with immediate effect to sign that that finance bill that was recently debated in Parliament, and make sure that 16% on VAT is suspended, not for 2 years, but forever.
Atwoli said that the implementation of the tax has further burdened the ordinary mwananchi by raising the cost of living, and warned that he may call on workers countrywide to protest the new fuel levy.
I want to ask President Uhuru if it is in his interest that Cotto should organize workers throughout the country to go on strike because of this. Because life is becoming unbearable. If other organizations like private transporters of petrol went on strike, what makes this government think that Kenyans can't stand up for their rights once and for all? We don't want to take that route, but we want amicable solution by the Kenyan government.
He urged the government to look for alternative ways of raising the funds rather than raising Kenyan tax burden.
Somebody suggested today, paper, that instead of taxing poor Kenyans, ordinary Kenyans who cannot now access transport, the matatu fares have gone up, everything has gone up, because when you touch petrol, you have touched the life of a normal Kenyan in this country. Why couldn't the Kenya government look for another alternative of taxation? For those people who are importing big slick cars, for those people who are doing magendo, and for those people who have their money outside this country, for those people who have stashed their money in their houses, they should be heavily taxed. Because Kenya government knows who has money in the house.
He further urged the Cabinet Secretary for Labour and Social Services, Kuru Yatani, to gazette the 5% increment of the minimum wage that he announced during this year's Labour Day celebrations, which will go a long way in alleviating the economic burden that the citizenry is currently facing.
I'm appealing to the current Minister for Labour, Ukur Yatan, to be little bit proactive. Let him be seen that he was appointed to take care of welfare of workers. Because you cannot announce, he's the one who announced 5% on behalf of His Excellency the President. And he's the one who is mandated by gazettement of the same. And he has stayed on the 5%, 5 months he has not gazetted. Kenyan workers are suffering, and that 5% will go a long way to assist them, and the minister must gazette that with immediate effect.
As more voices are added to call on for the suspension of the 16% value-added tax, all eyes are now peeled on the president's next course of action. For Brand Plus TV Business News, I am Elsa Atieno.
For Africa to industrialize and fully exploit its wealth of natural resources, energy has to be in abundance. It is for this reason that relevant stakeholders in the energy sector are convening at the KICC for the 20th edition of the Future Energy East Africa Conference and Expo. The two-day event strategic conference brings together East Africa's power decision makers to discuss government approach to energy access. Take a look at that report. In 2015, speaking at the 17th edition of the Future Energy East Africa Conference and Expo, the Principal Secretary Energy and Petroleum, Dr. Joseph Njoroge, promised that by 2018, Kenya would be at 70% connectivity to power. This year, the country's power connection stands at 73%, and the PA says the government is committed to ensuring that by 2022, the whole country will be fully powered by electricity.
We have had adequate support, actually passionate support from the government to be able to reach our access rate. We have done a lot of work. We have worked very well with the development partners, without whom it would have been very difficult to mobilize sufficient resources to create that enabling environment for access of electricity to all Kenyans. We have reached 73%, as Albert said. We are looking into using both grid power and off-grid power to ensure that by 2022, everybody, even those in the off-grid areas, will have access to power.
Equally, by 2022, the government is committed to have achieved its Big Four agenda. However, for any of the Set 4 agenda to be achieved, there has to be enough energy in the country to fuel these 4-year short-term government projects, as well as the long-term projects such as Vision 2030.
When you get to the Big Four, how do you achieve manufacturing without reliable, adequate, sustainable, cost-effective power sources? That is what we will achieve, and that when you turn over, you will see that that is what we aspire as a ministry to achieve. We want to give Kenyans reliable, we want to give them sustainable, we want to give them competitively priced, affordable energy sources.
Kenya for a long time has relied on hydroelectric power. However, with the changing tide, it is now being forced to explore alternative sources of power such as solar, geothermal and wind. To this regard, the PA has called for regional integration between the East African Community member states as far as power exploration is concerned.
So these resources can only be shared by having regional integration. In our country today, we look to getting connected to Ethiopia. By next year, June, we will have interconnection with Ethiopia. We are working on interconnection with Tanzania. By the end of, maybe by mid-2020, we should have interconnection with Tanzania. We should have also interconnection with Uganda and Rwanda. And this interconnection will play a very significant role in distributing the available resources so that we can be able to wheel the power to the various areas of demand.
The East African energy sector is a fast-growing sector. The region has an abundance of different sources of both renewable and non-renewable power. The challenge now remains on the member states to explore and exploit these energy sources so as to power the growth and development of the region. In this era of smart gadgets and social media, saying that news spreads like wildfire is an understatement. Receiving and disseminating information is no longer a preserve of the Fifth Estate. The result, fake news. As Kenya Media Week kicked off today, it is no wonder that media owners, journalists, audiences, and those in communication academia tackle the fast-growing vexed question that is fake news. Our reporter Karari John tells us more.
Fake news is not new in Kenya. For example, the widespread conspiracy theory that HIV and AIDS was a secret weapon created by the West to wipe out Africans. Now, with a strong social media growth, fake news has found its way and rooted itself in the media. In this respect, Media Focus on Africa, an organization which works in the field of communication for development, and the National Endowment brought together all stakeholders with a day-one theme of preserving truth in the media.
Fake news is information that mimics the real news, and it causes damage and causes sensationalization. Yeah, and a lot of bloggers and internet users may do this because of trying to make money or trying to get a following.
Fake news has become a phenomenon that's diluting and contaminating news content across media platforms. The spread of false information can have a far-reaching impact on brands and businesses.
For corporates, fake news can have real financial implications if a story is generated to try and tarnish the name of a brand and impacts the way that consumers view that brand. Then, consumers move away from, purchasing services or products from that brand. Then, they lose business. In terms of politically, parties and individuals and organizations can lose, followership and become, maybe distrusted by audiences and citizens of different countries just because of fake news stories that have gone out and tarnished their reputation or tried to malign their reputations.
As the 2018 Kenya Media Week continues, it is clear that the media is a mirror of the society and as such should reflect its exact image. Here at BRAMPLUS TV, we commit to bring you credible, reliable and objective news throughout. Reporting for BRAMPLUS TV, I am Karari John Wambugu.
AIDEX, which is the leading platform for professionals in humanitarian and development aid, returned to Nairobi today for its 4th regional conference. The 2-day event theme is Revolution in the Digital Age, Safeguarding a Future for All. Now, how can technology contribute to a positive social impact? The conference brings together the humanitarian aid community to deliberate on aid-driven development in the digital age. Our reporter Daisy Omboa attended the first day of the event and brings us the following story.
Good morning.
The 2-day event has attracted over 500 humanitarian aid professionals from East Africa and beyond. Speaking at the event, Michael Kilpatrick, the senior advisor of Good Financial Grant Practice, stated that it is important for the continent to understand that the international aid should be used for emergencies only, explaining how aid is important in economic development.
People need to remember what the title says. It's humanitarian aid. It is there for should be there for times of emergency, to help an organization, to help a society when it is in need of aid. The problem we have, and it's across continental Africa and the global south, is that communities, countries and nations then become dependent on the aid and they don't start to self-develop so that they can reduce the amount of aid that they either need or require.
He also stated that there is the need to focus on building capacity for the nations instead of always depending on aid if at all sustainable economic development is to be achieved.
The aid they're receiving, okay, they might get it next month, they might get it next year, but there's absolutely no guarantee they'll be receiving it in a few years from now, or in 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. And this continent has got to stop being dependent on international aid as an alternative to developing its own economic sort of vibrancy. And therefore any organisation receiving international aid has to build its capacities and capabilities to become financially self-sufficient.
It's a bit difficult.
Also present at the conference was Jennifer Nyanjui, the Global Director of Technologies at the 1 Acre Fund, spoke on how the emerging and already existing technologies are working towards meeting the SDGs in the 2030 agenda.
So I think there's a lot of opportunity for technology to be used to support all of the activities that go into building our communities as well as the SDGs, because they go hand in hand. Particularly, it's how you think about programs that are at scale. If you're looking at a 1 Acre Fund, we serve almost 700,000 farmers, small-scale farmers. In order to do that, we can't use pen and paper, we must use technology. And so we must use technology in our operations and how we handle our operations, but also in how we interact with our farmers. What's of particular interest is that it's not just about any technology, it's about technology that they are capable of using and are capable of accessing. So we may not be able to develop fancy smartphone applications, but we can look into two-way SMS applications, USSD, and other low-tech kind of solutions to be able to support them better. In terms of the SDGs, when we're looking at now what countries are thinking about in terms of their efforts to improve the lives of the most poor and vulnerable, they can use technology again as scale. So for example, in Kenya, Kenya is supporting almost over 1 million beneficiaries in social protection. You can't do that again with pen and paper. You have to think about technology advances to support that.
The director of the event, Nicholas Rutherford, spoke on how the conference, in its capacity as a meeting point for the aid workers, will help build capacity for those represented, thereby becoming integral contributors to the country's achievement of sustainable development goals by 2030.
The SDGs are met, but the problem in terms of technology is how inclusive is it? We've got to make sure that people don't get left behind. We've got to make sure that people in rural locations where they don't have electrical supply have ways of operating, and their children can get an education, and people can get jobs, and people can benefit from the digital revolution. So there is this danger that the digital revolution means a lot for people in urban centres and perhaps is not as advanced in the rural areas, but actually the digital technology is so perfectly suited to rural areas to overcome the fact that people are in wilderness locations so that they have opportunities equal to people in urban areas.
Most participants were hopeful that technology, if well utilized in aid, will unlock the achievement of social good. Even as the country continues to enjoy aid, it is imperative for stakeholders to turn this aid into sustainable development by harnessing the power of technology. For Brand Plus TV Business News, I am Daisy Wambua.
Now let's shift gears and take a look at the day's market performances, and here is a summary. That is how the markets performed today, but for more in-depth analysis, tune in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for my next big bet with Rachel Deritu and Karanja Daniel as they carry out an in-depth analysis of the financial markets and other investment opportunities available for you, dear viewer. Now that's all the time we had tonight on the Business News Desk. On behalf of the whole production team that made it a success, thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. Good night. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.